Welcome back everyone. Today we are going to start chapter 3, the Delhi Sultans. In chapter 2, we saw that regions like the Kaveri Delta became the center of large kingdoms. So the Kaveri Delta became the center of large kingdoms. Did you notice that there was no mention of a kingdom with Delhi as its capital? So we have not seen a kingdom with a mention of Delhi as its capital. That was because Delhi became an important city only in the 12th century. So in the 12th century, Delhi became an important city. Take a look at table 1. Delhi first became the capital of a kingdom under the Tomara Rajputs, who were defeated in the middle of the 12th century by the Chauhans, also referred to as Chahamanas of Ajmer. It was under the Tomaras and Chauhans that Delhi became an important commercial center. So it was under the Tomaras and Chauhans that Delhi became an important commercial center. Many rich Jaina merchants lived in the city and constructed several temples. Coins minted here called Delhi Wall had a wide circulation. So the Delhi Wall had a large circulation. So you can see the transformation of Delhi into a capital that controlled vast areas of the subcontinent started with the foundation of the Delhi Sultanate in the beginning of the 13th century. So by the beginning of the 13th century, Delhi Sultanate was founded, and it becomes a very important city. So you can see here. Take a look at table 1 again and identify the 5 dynasties that together made the Delhi Sultanate. Okay, so you can see here the Delhi Sultans built many cities in the area that we know as Delhi. Look at the map 1 and look at Delhi 1, Kuhna, Siri and Jahanpana. So you can see here there is Jahanpana, that is Kunha, and Hopscotch is here and Siri is here. So you can see here the Delhi. So the rulers of Delhi in the table 1, Rajput dynasty is Tomara Ananga Pala. He ruled from 1130 to 1145, and Tomaras ruled in the early 12th century to 1165. So Chauhans from 1165 to 1192. Prithviraj Chauhan was the main king 1175 to 1192. Early Turkish ruler from 1206 to 1290. So he was Qutbuddin Aybak from 1206 to 1210, and Shamsuddin Iltutmish from 1210 to 1236, and Razia from 1236 to 1240, and Ghiyasuddin Balwan from 1266 to 1287. So you can see here Iltutmish tomb. So you can see here the tomb. So then the Khiljis come. Khalji dynasty from 1290 to 1220. Jalaluddin Khalji from 1290 to 1296. He ruled like 6 years. And then Alauddin Khalji from 1296 to 1316. So around 20 years he ruled. And then came the Tughlaq dynasty from 1320 to 1440. So he was Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq from 1320 to 1324. Then Muhammad Tughlaq from 1324 to 1351, and then Firuz Shah Tughlaq from 1351 to 1388. Then came the Sayyid dynasty from 1414 to 1451. So he was Khizr Khan from 1414 to 1421. Then came the Lodi dynasty. In the Lodi dynasty, they ruled around 1451 to 1526. So he was Bahlul Lodi from 1451 to 1489. So you can see here Firuz Shah Tughlaq's tomb. So they made huge buildings around the tomb so that people may remember them. Finding out about the Delhi Sultans. Although inscriptions, coins and architecture provide a lot of information, especially valuable are histories, Tariq singular and Tawarik in plural, written in Persian, the language of administration under the Delhi Sultan. So you can see here the 4 stages of making a manuscript, preparing the paper. So here is a guy preparing a paper in A section, and in B section writing the text. So the guy, a bearded guy, is writing a text, and C is melting gold to highlight important. So he is melting gold by the old process, so that the words and passages can be highlighted with gold. So they were wasting money like anything. D, preparing the binding. So this guy is preparing the binding by binding the papers together. So the authors of Tawarik were learned men, secretaries, administrators, poets, and courtiers, who both recounted events and advised rulers on governance, emphasizing the importance of just rule. So the authors of Tawarik were learned men, and they were secretaries, administrators, poets, and courtiers who helped the ruler to rule nicely. So the circle of justice. Fakri Mudabbir wrote in the 13th century, a king cannot survive without soldiers, and soldiers cannot live without salaries. Salaries come from the revenue collected from peasants, but peasants can pay revenue only when they are prosperous and happy. This happens when the king promotes justice and honest governance. So it is clear. Keep the following additional details in mind. First, author of Tawarik lived in cities, mainly Delhi, and hardly ever in village. So the authors of Tawarik were living in cities, not in the village. They often wrote their histories for sultans in the hope of rich rewards. So they wrote the histories for the sultans, and in reward they get riches. These authors advise rulers on the need to preserve an ideal social order based on birthright and gender distinctions. Their ideas were not shared by everybody. So birthright and gender distinctions is given in a separate section. Privileges claimed on account of birth. For example, people believed that nobles inherited their rights to govern because they were born in certain families. So this was the birthright. If you are born in a certain family, so you inherit the right to govern. And the gender distinction is social and biological difference between woman and man. Usually these differences are used to argue that men are superior to women. So these were the gender distinction, that as a man is superior to woman in certain works. In 1236, Sultan Iltutmish's daughter Razia became Sultan. The chronicler of the age, Minaz-i-Siraj, recognized that she was more able and qualified than all her brothers, but he was not comfortable at having a queen as ruler. Not were the nobles happy at her attempts to rule independently. She was removed from the throne in 1240. So she was very qualified and all, but he was from mind he was thinking that men are superior, so they cannot see a woman ruling independently. So she was removed from the throne in 1240. What Minaz-i-Siraj thought about Razia? Minaz-i-Siraj thought that the queen's rule went against the ideal social order created by God, in which women were supposed to be subordinate to men. He therefore asked in the register of God's creation, since her account did not fall under the column of men, how did she gain from all of her excellent qualities? On her inscriptions and coins, Razia mentioned that she was the daughter of Sultan Iltutmish. This was in contrast to the Queen Rudrama Devi in 1262 to 1289 of the Kakatiya dynasty of Warangal, part of modern Andhra Pradesh. So Rudrama Devi changed her name on her inscriptions and pretended she was man. So Rudrama Devi pretended as a man and changed her name in the inscriptions. Another queen, Dida, ruled in Kashmir from 980 to 1003. Her title is interesting. It came from Didi or elder sister, and obviously affectionate term given to a loved ruler by her subjects. So the Dida had her name as Didi in the inscriptions, as so the people ruled by her loved her, so they give her the name Didi, a loved sister. Express Minaj's idea in your own word. Do you think Razia shared these ideas? Why do you think it was so difficult for women to be a ruler? From garrison town to empire, the expansion of the Delhi Sultanate. So the major cities captured by Shamsuddin Iltutmish. So you can see here these are the places near Delhi that was controlled by Shamsuddin. So in the early 13th century, the control of Delhi sultans rarely went beyond heavily fortified towns occupied by garrisons. The sultans seldom controlled the hinterland of the cities and were therefore dependent upon trade, tribute, or plunder for supplies. Controlling garrison towns is distant Bengal and Sindh from Delhi was extremely difficult. Rebellion, war, even bad weather could snap fragile communication routes. Delhi authorities was also challenged by Mongol invasions from Afghan and by governors who rebelled at any sign of the Sultan's weakness. So if there was any sign, they would rebel against the Sultan. The Sultanate barely survived these challenges. Its consolidation occurred during the region of Ghiyasuddin Balban and further expansion under Alauddin Khalji and Muhammad Tughlaq. So hinterland are the land adjacent to a city or port that supplied it with goods and services. Garrison town is a fortified settlement with soldiers. The first set of campaigns along the internal frontiers of the Sultan aimed at consolidating the hinterlands of the garrison towns. During these campaigns, forests were cleared in the Ganga Yamuna Doab and hunter-gatherers and pastoralists expelled from their habitat. These lands were given to the peasant and agriculture was encouraged. New fortresses, garrison towns and towns were established to protect trade routes and to promote the regional trade. So the peasants were given land and agriculture was encouraged, and new fortress, garrison towns and towns were established to protect trade routes and promote trade. The second expansion occurred along the external frontier of the Sultanate. Military expeditions into southern India started during this region of Alauddin Khalji. So they started to expand their kingdom to the further to the south. You can see in the map 3, and culminated with Muhammad Tughlaq. In the campaign, Sultanate armies captured elephants, horses, and slaves and carried away precious metals. By the end of Muhammad Tughlaq's reign, 150 years after somewhat humble beginnings, the armies of the Delhi Sultanate had marched across a large part of the subcontinent. They had defeated rival armies and seized cities. So you can see here they are going to the south. In 1299 they went to Gujarat. At 1303 they went to Chittor, and then at 1901 they went to Ranthambore, and in 1305 they came to Mandu, and from Mandu they went to Devagiri, and from Devagiri they went to the Warangal near Andhra Pradesh, and from 1310 to 1311 they went to Dwara Samudra, and from Dwara Samudra they went to Tanjavur, and from 1302 to 1303 they went to Warangal. From Kara they went to Devagiri. So they had defeated rival armies and seized cities. The sultanates collected tax from the peasantry and dispensed justice in its realm. But how complete and effective was its control over such a vast territory? So you can see Alauddin Khilji campaign in South India. So this was it. So in the figure 2 you can see Qawwat al-Islam mosque and minaret built during the last decade of the 12th century. This was the congregational mosque of the first city built by the Delhi Sultans, described as the Chronicles of Delhi-i Kuhna, the old city. The mosque was enlarged by Iltutmish and Alauddin Khalji. The minar was built by two sultans, Qutbuddin Aibak and Iltutmish. So you can see here the masjid. It was a large masjid built by these guys. The masjid mosque is called a masjid in Arabic. Literally, a place where Muslim prostrates in reverence to Allah. In a congregational mosque, Masjid-i-Jami or Jama Masjid, Muslims read their prayers, namazi together. Members of the congregational choose the most respected learned male as the leader, imam, for the ritual or prayer. He also delivers the sermon khutbah during the Friday prayer. So you can see here, this is Begumpuri Mosque built in the region of Muhammad Tughlaq, was the main mosque of Jahan Panaha, the sanctuary of the world, the new capital in Delhi. So you can see in chapter C1, map 1. During the prayer, Muslims stand facing Mecca. In India, this is to the west. This is called the Qibla. So this is the mosque. So there are different mosques. The Delhi Sultans built several mosques in the city all over the subcontinent. These demonstrate their claims to be the protector of Islam and Muslims. Mosques are also helped to create the sense of community of believers who shared a belief system and a code of conduct. It was necessary to reinforce the idea of community because Muslims came from the variety of backgrounds. So you can see Mot Ki Masjid built in the region of Sikandar Lodi by the ministers. So you can see the mosque of Jamali in Kamali built in the late 1520. A closer look, administration and consolidation under the Khaljis and the Tughlaqs. The consolidation of a kingdom as vast as the Delhi Sultanate needed reliable governors and administrators rather than appointing aristocrats and land chieftains as governor. So the early Delhi Sultans, especially Iltutmish, favored their special slave purchase for military services called Bandhagan, and in Persian they were carefully trained to man some of the most important political offices in the kingdom. Since they were totally dependent upon their master, the Sultan could trust and rely upon them. So slave rather than sons. The sultans were advised, a slave whom one has brought up and promoted must be looked after for its need and whole lifetime, and good luck to find a worthy and experienced slave. Wise men have said that a worthy and experienced slave is better than a son. So they considered the slave as better than their son. So these were their ideology. The Khiljis and Tughlaqs continued to use Bandhagan and also raise people in humble birth who were also often their clients to high political positions. They were appointed as generals and governors. However, this is also introduced an element of political instability. So the client is referred to as someone who is under the protection of one of another, a dependent or hanger-on. Slaves and clients were loyal to their masters and patrons, but not to their heirs. New sultans had their own servants. As a result, the accession of a new monarch often saw conflict between the old and the new nobility. So there were always conflict when there was a accession of monarch. The patronage of these humble people by the Delhi sultans also shocked many cities, and the authors of Persian Tawarikh criticized the Delhi sultans for appointing the low and base-born to high officers. So here also there was conflicts as they were choosing low peoples in the offices. Officials of Sultan Muhammad Tughlaq. Sultan Muhammad Tughlaq appointed Aziz Khumar, a wine distiller, Firuz Hajam, a barber, Manka Tabak, a cook, and two gardeners, Latka and Pira, to high administrative posts. Ziauddin Barani, a mid 14th century chronicler, reported their appointment as a sign of Sultan's loss of political judgment and his incapacity to rule. So this was his mistake. So he trusted a barber and some other like wine distiller and cook, etc. He appointed them to a high post, and this led to his downfall. Like the earlier sultans, the Khalji and Tughlaq monarchs appointed military commanders as governors of territories of varying sizes. These lands were called Iqta and their holders were called Iqtadar or Mukti. The duty of the Muktis was to lead military campaigns and maintain law and order in their Iqta. In exchange for the military services, the Muktas collected the revenues of their assignment as salaries. They also paid their soldiers from their revenues. Control over Muktis was most effective in their office was not inheritable, and if they were assigned Iqtas for a short period of time before being shifted. The harsh conditions of service were rigorously imposed during the region of Alauddin Khalji and Muhammad Tughlaq. So there was a severe condition in the service. Accountants were appointed by the state to check the amount of revenue collected by the muktis. Care was taken that the muktis collected only the taxes prescribed by the state and that he kept the required number of soldiers. As the Delhi sultans brought the hinterland of the cities under the control, they forced the landed chieftains, the Samantas, aristocrats, and rich landlords to accept their authority under Alauddin Khalji. The state brought the assessment and collection of land revenue under its own control. The rights of the local chieftain to levy taxes were cancelled and they were also forced to pay taxes. The sultan's administrators measured the land and kept careful accounts. Some of the old chieftain and landlord served the sultanate as revenue collectors and assessors. So all chieftains and landlords helped them. There were three types of taxes on cultivation called kharaj and amounting to about 50% of the peasants' produce. So the kharaj was about 50% of peasants' produce on cattle and on horses. There were three types of taxes. It is important to remember that large part of the subcontinent remained outside the control of Delhi sultans. It was difficult to control distant provinces like Bengal from Delhi, and soon after annexing southern India, the entire region became independent. Even in the Gangetic plain, there were forested areas that Sultan forces could not penetrate. Local chieftains established their rule in their region. Sometimes rulers like Alauddin Khalji and Muhammad Tughlaq could force their control in this area, but only for a short duration. So there were far off places like Bengal, and also they could not, their hand could not reach there. So they were free and they were independent while the Khalji was doing a campaign in south. So they were almost free, and because of the forest in between, they could not penetrate these lands further Delhi. So sometimes they go there, but they could not control them for a long duration of time. So chieftains and their fortifications. Ibn Battuta, a 14th century traveler from Morocco, Africa, explained that chieftains sometimes fortified themselves in mountains, in rocky, uneven, and rugged places, as well as in the bamboo groves. In India, the bamboo is not hollow; it is big. Its several parts are so intertwined that even fire cannot affect them, and they are on the whole very strong. The chieftains live in these forests which serve them as ramparts, inside which are their cattle, and their crops. There is also water for them within that. This is rainwater which collects there. Hence, they cannot be subdued except by powerful armies who entering this forest cut down the bamboos with especially prepared instruments. The Mongols under Genghis Khan invaded Transoxana of northeast Iran in 1219, and the Delhi Sultanate faced their onslaught soon after. Mongol attacks on the Delhi Sultanate increased during the reign of Alauddin Khalji and in the year of Muhammad Tughlaq's rule. This forced the two rulers to mobilize the last standing army in Delhi, which posed as a huge administrative challenge. Let us see how the two sultans dealt with this. So you can see here, this is a table. So you can explain it will explain Alauddin Khilji and Muhammad Tughlaq. Delhi was attacked twice in 1299 to 1302 to 1303. As a defensive measure, Alauddin Khalji raised a last standing army. Muhammad Tughlaq, the Sultanate was attacked in the early year of the Muhammad Tughlaq's region. The Mongol army was defeated. Muhammad Tughlaq was confident about the strength of his army and his resources to plan an attack on the Transoxiana. He therefore raised a large standing army. Alauddin Khalji constructed a new garrison named Siri for the soldier, as you seen in map 1. Rather than constructing a new garrison town, the oldest of the four cities of Delhi-e-Khuna was emptied of its residents and the soldiers garrisoned there. The residents of the old city were sent to the new capital, Daulatabad, in the south. Alauddin Khilji The soldier had to be fed. This was done through the produce collected as tax from lands between the Ganga and Yamuna. Tax was fixed at 50% of the peasants' yield, and produce from the same area was collected as tax to feed the army. So the produce from the same area was collected as tax to feed the army, but to meet the expenses of maintaining such a large number of soldiers, the Sultan levied the additional tax. So he levied the additional tax. This coincided with the famine in the area. So there was famine, and he also was not exerting pressure on the peasants. Then Alauddin Khalji, the soldier had to be paid. Alauddin chose to pay the soldier's salary in cash rather than iktas. The soldiers would buy their supplies from merchants in Delhi, and it was thus feared that merchants would raise their prices. To stop this, Alauddin controlled the prices of goods in Delhi. Prices were carefully surveyed by officers, and merchants who did not sell at the prescribed rates were punished. So the merchants had to pay their supplies in sell their supplies in the prescribed prices. Muhammad Tughlaq also paid his soldier cash salaries, but instead of controlling prices, he used a token currency, somewhat like present day paper currency, but made out of cheap metals, not gold or silver. People in the 14th century did not trust these coins. They were very smart. They saved their gold and silver coins and paid all their taxes to the state with the token currency. This cheap currency could also be counterfeited easily. So the counterfeit currency was also in numbers. So the peasants were very intelligent. They saved their silvers and golds. Alauddin's administrative measures were quite successful, and chroniclers praised his reign for its cheap prices and efficient supplies of goods in the market. He successfully withstood the threat of Mongol invasion. So Alauddin Khilji's was the successful invasion, successful rule, and he was successful in invading Mongols. Muhammad Tughlaq's administrative measures were a failure. His campaigns into Kashmir was a disaster. He then gave up his plans to invade Transoxiana and disbanded his large army. Meanwhile, his administrative measures created complications. The shifting of people to Daulatabad was resented. The raising of taxes and famine in the Ganga Yamuna belt led to widespread rebellion, and finally the token currency has to be recalled. So the token currency has been recalled because of the foolishness. In this list of Muhammad Tughlaq's failures, we sometimes forget that for the first time in the history of the Sultanate, a Delhi Sultan planned a campaign to capture Mongol territory. Unlike Alauddin's defensive measure, Muhammad Tughlaq's measures were conceived as a part of military offensive against the Mongols. The Sultanate in 15th and 16th century. Take a look at table 1 again. You will notice that after the Tughlaqs, the Sayyid and Lodi dynasties ruled the Delhi and Agra until 1526. By then, Jaunpur, Bengal, Malwa, Gujarat, Rajasthan, and the entire South India had independent rulers who established flourishing states and prosperous capitals. This was also the period which saw the emergence of the new ruling group like the Afghans and the Rajputs. Some of the states established in this period were small but powerful and extremely well administered. Sher Shah Suri, 1540 and 1545, started his career as the manager of small territory for his uncle in Bihar, and eventually challenged and defeated the Mughal Emperor Humayun from 1530 to 1540 and 1555 to 1556. Sher Shah captured Delhi and established his own dynasty. So he was a small worker there, but he a manager in a small territory, but he challenged Humayun and defeated him. He captured Delhi and established his own dynasty. Although the Sur dynasty ruled only for 15 years, from 1540 to 1555, it introduced an administration that borrowed elements from Alauddin Khalji and made them more efficient. Sher Shah's administration became the model followed by the great emperor Akbar from 1556 to 1605, when they consolidated the Mughal Empire. So the three orders the peace of God, knights, and the crusades. The idea of the three order was first formulated in France in the early 11th century. It divided society into three classes: those who prayed, those who fought, and those who tilled the land. This division of society into three order was supported by the church to consolidate its dominant role in society. This helped the emergence of a new warrior group called knights. The church patronized this group and used them to propagate their idea of peace of God. The attempt was to direct warriors away from the conflict amongst themselves and send them instead to on campaign against the Muslims who had captured the city of Jerusalem. This led to a series of campaigns called the Crusades. These campaigns in the service of God and the church completely altered the status of knights. Originally, these knights did not belong to the class of nobles, but by the end of the 11th century in the France and a century later in Germany, the humble of origin of these warriors were forgotten. By the 12th century, nobles also wanted to be known as knights. So here the chapter is finished. We will start the fourth chapter in the next class. Thank you.